I actually thought the movie would date back to an earlier period. It in fact surprised me that our oldest surviving silent film dates back to only 80 years or so, said actor and Byeonsa narrator Cho Hee-bong in an interview with the Korea Herald. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Theater of the Golden Silent Films podcast. As we make our way back into the home office after a night on the silent town, much of the time we here at the podcast are forced to enjoy these timeless films on the office television, but every once in a while we get to have a really cool experience, and this one was an unbelievable live silent experience. Crossroads of Youth was a film bearing an art form thought to be long lost, and we are here to tell you all about it and hopefully pass its legacy on to all of you fine listeners out there. Before we immerse ourselves in the world of the Byeonsa, let's give the usual Golden Silent Films podcast social media roll call. As usual, do follow Golden Silence Cast on Instagram for up-to-date info on this podcast. And for everyone on Twitter, just follow @GoldenSilence1 or just search Golden Silence Cast and you will find us there. And these sites and screen names will be in the episode description in case you're interested in checking us out. And believe me, we would love to have you on board. At both social spaces, you'll get behind-the-scenes pictures and info, upcoming episodes, and other fun and cool silent movie-related materials. And also, fun photos of cool cats. Also, if you're listening to this program on Apple Podcast or Spotify, please leave a review, a rating, or both. All of those ratings and reviews help a lot. They tell the story of our little show, and we would love your help in spreading the word. Let all of your wildest review-leaving dreams come true and help our little show grow. Whether getting us more exposure in the vast world of podcasts or letting us know what we can do better, we appreciate the feedback and endeavor to bring you the best show possible. As a subscriber of the Golden Silent Films podcast, you will never miss an episode, and the moment we release new content, it will be downloaded right to your ears via your listening device of choice. And we have a lot of cool stuff coming down the pipe, and we don't want you to miss a second. This adventure that we're about to embark on, which is overall episode 26 of the podcast, will be taking us out of the cozy confines of the United States as we go international again. We've been to England with The Ring, and Germany with a whole lot of Nosferatu-related goodness, but according to the sticker on our suitcase now, our next stop is Seoul, South Korea. Now, before we get into the film proper, I wanted to thank a few groups that made this event that we went to possible. This screening was presented in partnership with the Korea Society of New York City and the Korea Foundation, as well as the University of Pittsburgh's Momentum Fund and the Year of Data and Society grant. Also, the Golden Silent Films podcast would also like to shout out the group Screenshot Asia. For a little background on this organization, Screenshot Asia brings Asian film and media to Pittsburgh and the southwestern Pennsylvania region. Their goal is to share cultural experiences, support the arts, and create an atmosphere for humanities and arts scholarship. Last but not least, a big thank you to the University of Pittsburgh's Asian Studies Center for putting on such a memorable night of film. I love it when films like this really get the red carpet rolled out for them, and the viewer gets the full experience of seeing these movies on the big screen. Now, this event took place on November 5th, 2022, high up in the University of Pittsburgh's historic Alumni Hall. So, let's talk a little bit about the venue that served as the location for our super cool movie night. This former Masonic temple is a behemoth of a building sitting on the Oakland campus of the University of Pittsburgh. This building is the epitome of historic, sitting on both the National Registry of Historic Places as well as being an official Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation historic landmark. Construction began in 1914 on the 9-story tall building. Our screening of Crossroads of Youth took place on the 7th floor auditorium. As we entered the elevator on the ground floor of the Alumni Hall, we had no idea what to expect from this event. Would it be sparsely attended? Would it be standing room only? Personally, I had no clue. Generally speaking, I tend to be a terrible judge of what is or isn't popular. I can't tell you how many concerts I've bought tickets to thinking it's going to be a surefire packed house, only to get there and be surrounded by a crowd in the double digits. So, This show had us perplexed. Sure, silent films are on the rise in popularity, but they're still kind of niche. Even more niche is that this is a lost Korean silent presented in Korean with English subtitles. What kind of crowd was on that 7th floor eagerly awaiting Crossroads of Youth? The answer to that question came as the elevator binged to a stop and the door slid open. Walking out, you could feel the excitement in the air. All that palpable excitement was generated by the incredible crowd on hand for this event. Tons of people were bustling about, and to the unknowing witness, you'd never know this was a crowd for a silent film screening. People showed up in full force, and that never fails to put a smile on my silent movie-loving face. As part of the event, Korean snacks and finger foods were given out pre-show to get everyone fully into the spirit of the impending performance. Unfortunately, we had no idea about these themed extracurriculars, or we would have made it to the show much earlier. As it stood, though, the setup really added to the environment and experience. But, lest you be worried about your Golden Silent Films podcast gang, we did get some Korean candy that was being handed out, so all was not lost on the snack front. So, we make our way into the theater, candy in hand. At this point, there was already a great crowd on hand and in seats. And what a fascinating crowd it was. The thing that was really awesome about this was the sheer diversity in the audience. Of course, there was a big Korean contingent on hand, but there were also people of every ethnicity and age. There were obviously Pitt students in attendance, in addition to the folks like us just out for some historical movie watching. It was super cool to see such a wide spectrum of folks who turned out for this. As it got closer and closer to showtime, more and more people were filtering in. With the seats filling up, you could totally feel the electricity in the air. I realize that may seem, hyperbolic or way over the top, but it was definitely there. Everyone in attendance knew they were here for something special. I can totally see that. I was there with everyone else feeling that movie magic. This seemed to me to be quite different from many of the silents I've had the fortune to see in theaters. Not even counting the live performance part of it, but just as a film, this was special. Like we were the first to see this long hidden treasure. It seems silly to say that maybe, but I definitely felt it. Like I mentioned earlier, it's niche inside a niche. This isn't a film that everyone has seen a million times over the last 90 years. This felt like a reveal. A look into something this crowd and myself could enjoy together for the first time as a group. A communal experience if ever there was one. It's wild that a lost Korean silent movie from 1934 could be the rally point and binding agent of so many people from so many different walks of life. That this is that magic that can only exist in a movie theater full of enthusiastic filmgoers. And it's important to note that this performance and the one in New York a couple days earlier were the first tour stops post-pandemic shutdowns. It had been a good while since this film was presented, and it must have felt great for everyone involved to be back in action and spreading the gospel of the Byeonsa. So, I've already mentioned the term Byeonsa a couple times, but before we fully get into what that's all about, we're going to first go to the movie houses of Japan. The earliest films available for public display in Japan were produced by Western studios, portraying brief scenes of everyday life. This required the addition of the benshi to bring these stories and experiences to the moviegoers. Benshi were thus hired to provide technical and cultural context of the films to the audience. Even the operation of the projector itself would be described before the showing, and then the explanations of Western culture would accompany the film with the benshi standing to the side of the screen. This commentary was as much a part of the theater-going experience as the film itself. A really fun example of this comes in the 1994 film Picture Bride, directed by Kaio Hata. The film takes place in Hawaii in 1918 on a sugarcane plantation, worked by many Asians with a large contingent of Japanese. This was a really, really good, really terrific film, but for our purposes, what makes it relevant to our story is the appearance of a benshi played by the legendary Toshiro Mifune. It's a short bit in the overall film, but a traveling silent film show comes through the plantation, and we see Mifune narrating in the silent movie they are watching. It's a really cool way to see this style of film presentation brought to life. That benshi tradition would cross national borders as it was adopted in Taiwan with the name Pyeonsu, and more importantly to our episode, it found its way to Korea from the first decade of the 20th century, where this performance art would be called Byeonsa. This is where we first introduced director of the Crossroads of Youth experience, Kim Tae-young. In an interview with writer and professor Areum Jeong, he expounds on some of the things he and his collaborators learned as they worked to bring about the most fully realized, authentic Byeonsa possible. Tae-young explains, "After conducting research and listening to the records from that time, we learned that each Korean film narrator during the silent film period had a distinctive style. For example, Kim Young-hun, a well-known film narrator, would not deliver narrations in a dramatic tone. He would just narrate the film as if talking to a friend. In a way, these film narrators are having a conversation with the audience via film. Many of the dramatic tones the Koreans are familiar with emerged after liberation from Japan, from the melodramas or national theater." He continues, "Film narrators were necessary for the audience because the earliest films were imported. Because most Koreans had little exposure to other cultures, the film narrator was essential in explaining the film to the audience. Being a cultural interpreter was so important to the audience that often audience members would make the choice as to which film narrator to see rather than what film to see." I realize we're doing this a bit backwards, but since we just heard from Kim Tae-young, it seems only right that we properly introduce the unofficial king of rediscovered Korean silent cinema. On the education side of things, Kim started off with a degree in politics and diplomacy, but a dip into film production sparked a new interest, which eventually led him to study in filmmaking at the Korean Academy of Film Arts in 1996. One of his biggest and most well-known films came in 1999 with the horror film Memento Mori, which was a hit with critics and audiences alike. His 2006 film Family Ties and later 2010's Late Autumn solidified his name and reputation with international audiences. Now, as we've already talked about the official role of a Byeonsa, let's talk about the narrative voice of Crossroads of Youth, Cho Hee-bong. When you see him in his onstage performance, you can instantly tell he's got some great acting chops. In addition to a master's degree from Soyang University, he has an incredibly robust acting resume. Some of those credits include My Wife is a Gangster 3, Once Upon a Time, and the television series The Red Sleeve in 2021. Like I said, that is just a mere taste of his incredible talents. Now, Kim Tae-young talked about how he brought Cho Hee-bong on board in an interview with J.O., the senior director of arts and culture for the Korea Society. Kim would say, "The moment I decided to share this silent film with general audiences, I knew the most important collaborators would be a Byeonsa and a composer. The first person I called was the actor Cho Hee-bong. I told him that there is a silent film and asked if he would try to be a Byeonsa for it. And he said, sure, I think it's going to be fun. Is there a script? Nope, I said. What are we going to do? Well, I told him we have to write one. We worked together to write a script because even if I wrote it, a Byeonsa would decide how to convey it. Having talked a bit about the art form and the artists involved in the project, let's turn our attention to the specific film we saw and want to tell you about, 1934's Crossroads of Youth. So, according to the events program of the show we went to, we get some insight into the existence and wildlife story of Crossroads of Youth as a film that really almost disappeared forever. The program read, Crossroads of Youth is one of the few extant silent films in Korea. It had been believed to be lost, yet was found in 2007 in a vault of a few former theater owners' family. Its survival for over 7 decades was a miracle, given Korea's deeply turbulent modern history, from colonization to the Korean War to military dictatorship, to which Korea lost many of its treasured films, and in addition to its extreme combustibility as nitrate film. For some additional details about the discovery of this lost film, we turn to Claire Lee of the Korea Herald. In her article entitled Silent Film Narrator Returns to Modern Stage, she writes, the film, which deals with struggling young souls in 30s Korea, was discovered in 2007 by the Korean Film Archive, a government-affiliated institution devoted to collecting and preserving Korean films. That year, the organization received a roll of unknown film from a man whose mother used to run Dansunska, the first movie theater in Korea, which opened in 1907. Along with two other major movie theaters in Seoul at the time, Woomagwan and Chosun Movie Theater, Dansunska had about 6 Byeonsa who performed on a daily basis throughout the 1920s and 30s. Now, to the silent film fan, to the silent film follower, to the silent film faithful, this really isn't a new story. You get the once lost silent film turning up in an attic, a garage, or a vault. Some have even been hidden in film warehouses, either mislabeled or just generally misplaced. Though many films are long lost, hope always springs eternal for that next rediscovered film. And it's so cool that something so important to the cinematic history of a country turned up. From many of the articles I found about this film, they really showed a national pride in bringing this film back to life. I mean, in 2007, the cinematic history of Korea changed forever. Now, one of the things that makes this film and its survival even more miraculous is the general condition of it and how bad it was. We're going to talk about an interview later, but there are some pictures out there that really show how bad these reels were and what kind of desperate shape they were in. But besides, its restoration also required meticulous efforts because of its poor condition. The Korean Film Archive nonetheless brought it back to life, and in the following year, the Kirin Productions, led by director Kim Tae-young, joined the restoration project. And that little bit was from the Korean Cultural Center in New York at koreanculture.org. Now, it's one thing to find a long-lost film. It's a whole nother thing to bring it back to life. This film, while alive, was on life support. And the actual film was in terrible shape. And a lot of hard, painstaking work went into the restoration of Crossroads of Youth, as I talked about. And like the pictures of these rolls are, wow, they almost don't even look like film rolls at this point. Now, on YouTube, there is a fantastic interview with Kim Tae-young by J.O., the Senior Director of Arts and Culture for the Korea Society. Now, this is that video I was telling you about that had some really wild pictures about the rolls of film and the condition they were in. Now, this interview took place on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022. That would be just a few days before our screening in Pittsburgh. If you want to check out this great interview, simply search Kim Tae-young and Crossroads of Youth, and it should turn up fairly easily. And we will also leave a link to the show in our social media channels. Now, in that interview, Kim talked about what terrible, confusing state those reels were in. He said, according to some records, films were preserved in canisters. One roll of film in one canister. We found a document stating there were 8 canisters in total, but we only had 7. We knew for certain that some parts were missing, but we didn't know what the sequence was. We opened up all 7 canisters and began to determine what were the outtakes and what were the final takes, and perhaps this reel should go before that one. There were thousands of possibilities of how the story should go. Like he said, figuring out the narrative structure of this flick was almost as intense as the physical rehabilitation. Basic concepts like characters and story had to be sussed out and brought back to life. In the interview with Areum Jeong for her article Interweaving Korean Film and Performance, a conversation with Korean filmmaker and performance director Kim Tae-young, this event's director, Kim Tae-young, recounts the trials and tribulations of resurrecting this once lost silent. He explains, creating the Crossroads of Youth was very difficult. We did not know what the story was. We could not even tell if the characters were family or friends. So we viewed the film hundreds of times and even tried to read the actors' lips. We also did research and looked up newspapers from that time. Finally, the film narrator and I wrote the script together. It was a very difficult project, but I also had a lot of fun. Now, as we talked about earlier, the film wasn't finished with the plot and characters identified. There is that little problem of having no intertitles to convey the story. The need to return to the traditions of Byeonsa became critical in reviving this film and its story for modern audiences. But what story were they able to come up with? How about we talk about that right now as we break down the film itself? So, Crossroads of Youth was directed by Ahn Jong Hwa, and the plot of Crossroads of Youth takes place in Seoul of 1934. Young Bok is a Korean fella in his 20s working hard for the family of his love. Young Bok is played here by Lee Won Yong. Unfortunately, this love goes south when she leaves him for a wealthier man from Seoul. This prompts him to leave his hometown in search of greener pastures in Seoul. Now, this opening bit really gives great insight into how the whole show and performance of the Byeonsa goes. We get great explanations of who some of the players in this drama are, but we also see some of the humor we will be getting liberally sprinkled out throughout the film. There was a gag and a joke that narrator Cho Hee-bong makes about Young Bok and eyeliner that cracked up the whole audience. This lets us know that we're in for a fun time and not about to see some overly dramatic picture that took itself way too seriously. Like we talked about earlier, the Byeonsa was a crucial part of the whole filmmaking enterprise at this time. According to Kim Tae-young, while they were in production, Byeonsa was not present at the shoots, but they filmed the movie with the role of the Byeonsa, a narrator, in mind. The narrator was not an addendum who was brought in to comment on the finished film. And he continues, Byeonsa was actually more important than the lead actors. It was recorded that Byeonsa was paid 30 won per month, which was twice the amount paid to the lead actor. With his heart broken, Young Bok leaves his hometown and family and trades that in for working at the train station in Seoul. Here at the station, we are also introduced to Guy Chol, a loan shark and generally bad dude getting off the train and ready for some no good. This scene was a standout for Areum Jeong. I was lucky enough to get to talk to her about Crossroads of Youth, and one of the things she told me was that she really liked watching the scenery of the Seoul train station because most of the visual materials in Korea were destroyed during the Korean War, and it was her first time seeing footage of the actual Seoul station. It felt surreal to her. So soon, Young Bok meets Jong Hwa, who works at a gas station nearby. At first, she's really into him, more so than the other way around. This is another bit with some great humor that endeared the film to the audience. The little interplay between the two of them. But soon, however, Young Bok ends up falling in love with her. At several points in the event, an actor and actress portraying Young Bok and Jong Hwa would come out on stage and perform a song. They were fantastic and were able to really add another dimension to the story being told on screen. As fun and unexpected as these musical numbers were, though, according to Jung, these cool interludes weren't always a part of the show. During our conversation, she told me the very first premiere of Crossroads actually didn't have live actors and musicians. It was added to the performance after a year, I think. I'm not sure exactly why it was added, but musical theater is very popular in Korea, so perhaps it was added to make it more entertaining and appealing to the audience. At the same time all of that is happening, Young Bok's sister, Young Ok, arrives in Seoul. She has come searching for her brother to tell him that their mother has passed away. She makes her way through Seoul searching for him, and as the film goes on, we will get a few near misses with the siblings just missing out on each other, and each time you feel so bad about it, especially considering what happens later. You are gutted thinking about how often they just passed each other without knowing, and how things could have changed if someone was a minute slower or faster. Unable to track down her brother, Young Ok takes a job at a cafe. One day, Myung-gu and his jerky loan shark friend Guy Chol visit the cafe where she is working. Guy Chol seduces Young Ok, eventually breaking her down and bringing her into his home. And there is nothing romantic about his intentions in this relationship at all. Guy Chol rapes the scared and alone Young Ok. With nowhere to go, Young Ok is forced to stay with Guy Chol at his home. Throughout this picture and the accompanying narration and music, certain aspects have been updated for the modern audience. That was something Kim Tae-young was incredibly cognizant of when putting this experience together. In his interview with J.O., Kim explains, "We're not screening this old format to the audience of the olden days. We are presenting this old movie in an old format to this contemporary audience. We wanted to avoid a sense of incongruity that a Beyonce's presence may suggest." So back to the film. Meanwhile, while that's going on, Young Hwa loses her job at the gas station. Without work and an ailing father and young sister at home, She has the unfortunate luck of crossing paths with Guy Chol. Fortunately, she is able to sidestep the skeezy and rapey Guy Chol. Like I said, she escapes, and her love, young Bok, soon finds out what Guy Chol has been up to. He takes up the fight and heads out to take on Guy Chol. When he gets there, he is reunited with his sister, young Ok. Now that he knows what she has been subjected to, he takes out Guy Chol and avenges his sister. Here you get some pretty cool action as young Bok exacts his retribution. Now this bit of vengeance was really cool and brought to mind another Korean film I love, Oldboy, one of my all-time favorite films, and some of that visceral, hammery fights in that film directed by Park Chan-wook. Now, young Bok just comes in like such a badass, taking people out, and on top of the really cool action, the music for this big action crescendo was fantastic and really built towards the big climax of the film. Now, we go back to that interview with J.O., and Kim Tae-young talks about the inclusion of action in Crossroads of Youth. Kim says, in the 30s, the most popular films of the time were in Japan and Korea were American silent films. Richard Talmadge, who is known for his action films, was very popular. Director Ahn Jong Hwa decided to make a Korean action film. He wanted to make one, but there were no action stars in Korea. He meets with Lee Won Yong, who is a member of the national judo team, and offers the main role of this action film to the judo practitioner. Lee Won Yong says he knows nothing about filmmaking, but the director said that's not an issue, and that is how this action film was made. And we get the payoff to that young Bok eyeliner joke from earlier in the film, and I loved how it all kind of wrapped up in one piece as the Byeonsa urges us to please give our hero, young Bok, a round of applause. In the end of the film, young Bok marries young Hai, and the couple start a new life. Now, Areum Jeong puts the film's narrative into historical perspective. She writes, the plot itself is nothing earth-shattering, but the film's images of Seoul in the 1930s capture the viewer's attention. When viewing the road on which both cars and wagons travel and the newly built Seoul station in flickering black and white images, I almost mistook the film for a fake documentary. It felt surreal in the sense that I was viewing Seoul under Japanese colonial rule. Such details enable each viewer to experience Seoul in the 1930s. So, after the screening, so the film's just ended, and after the screening there was a panel discussion where the folks behind the show took questions and talked about all things Crossroads of Youth. One of the interesting things that was talked about was that this production, it's a living, breathing being. A production that grows and changes with time and location. In an article entitled Crossroads of Youth, a constantly evolving performance of Korea's earliest silent film, writer Colette Balmain explains, Director Kim told me that he changes elements in the script from year to year, so that the performance of Crossroads of Youth is a continual metamorphosis. This is without a doubt the most ambitious project of Director Kim's career, and one of the most successful. I look forward with great anticipation to seeing it again, knowing that a second experience will be of necessity a different experience. Director Kim's project is one which returns the excitement and spectacle to cinema, constructing an active audience through its eventness rather than one dazzled by the mere spectacle of so many contemporary films, which are all surface and no substance. Here, the opposite is true. Now, in my conversations with Areum Jeong, she echoed those sentiments. When I asked her how many times she had seen Crossroads of Youth, she responded, I think at least 5 or 6 times. I like how each Byeonsa performance is different, even if it is the same film. The narrator will always insert ad-libs depending on the audience or location. For example, when I saw the performance at Busan, the narrator cleverly inserted some Busan dialect into his narration. I think that it's so cool to have this be a show that evolves and grows, just like the traditions that made Byeonsa so popular back in the day. It gives you reason to go back over and over. And if Crossroads of Youth is ever within driving distance of the Golden Silent Films podcast headquarters, we will be there with bells on. Next, let's talk about our thoughts concerning this film and the event as a whole. First, I'm not going to prolong the obvious. The film was fantastic. It was a joy to see. And the film cannot be separated from the Byeonsa. Cho Hee-bong really made the movie what it was. It's tough to think of a world where his wit and charm are not linked to the movie. In fact, I would rather not think of that world. That's a little depressing. But one of the things I wasn't expecting going into the auditorium was the humor he inserted into this movie. He had fun, and that fun was transferred to every single person in the audience. Whether it was an MST3K style quip, or one-liner, or the unexpected Gangnam style reference, he found the humor in a seemingly serious picture. That's not to say everything was a joke, though. The humor was expertly placed, and I could not have been happier. The love story at the heart of this film was incredibly well done as well, but you can look at that love story a little deeper and see some connections to Korean society at the time. Turning back to Areum Jeong, who explains, the film uses a love story to subtly convey a larger message about society. While Young Bok and Young Ok and Young Hai represent colonized Korean subjects, both Myung-gu and Gai Chol represent Japanese colonizers or pro-Japanese Koreans. The film's conclusion with Young Bok's victory might imply a wish for Korea's independence. The movie itself looked fantastic. Considering the depths of despair these reels had been in, the visuals were minty fresh. It was great to see the Seoul in the 1930s. It was a place and time I knew very little about, so to see these sights on the big screen was incredible. Another part of the production that really stood out was the music of the film. In his interview with J.O. of the Korea Society, Kim Tae-young talked about the music, how the music came about. Kim would say, "The other person I called was Park Chun-hwa, a composer working in musical theater. As the composer worked on the score for the whole film, we wanted the audience to feel that they were watching a classical film. However, we decided to create something that people can identify with, so added some dramatic tones. Our team composed music that seemed both old-fashioned and modern. They certainly succeeded on that front. Under the leadership of musical director Lee Jin-wook, the musicians seamlessly melded live music with film and narration. This is a crazy thin line to walk or a small needle to thread. With so much going on, it would be easy for the show to be extra or too much. But it wasn't, and never even got close to that danger zone. It all fit so perfectly that at times, I was so enthralled by the film and the Beyonce's performance that I forgot a live band was there. Simply fantastic. And like I talked about earlier, that music during the climactic fight scene was chef's kiss great. Now after the show, a question and answer panel was held with the cast and the crew. There were a lot of great stories and insights shared by everyone. And the Pittsburgh pride in me was strong when they talked about being super excited to be in the hometown of the late great director George Romero. I guess the love of zombies knows no international borders. On the Crossroads of Youth side of things, though, they went incredibly in-depth into many facets of the production. It was so much fun hearing the story of this film's resurrection and the inspirations for building it into what viewers see today. Overall, this was an unforgettable experience and one I will gladly do again if I am so lucky to have the chance. I cannot recommend this show enough and hope all of you fine listeners out there will get to experience the film and all of its Korean silent film traditions. On the Golden Silent Films podcast social media hangouts, we will do our best to share new tour dates for Crossroads of Youth. I get nothing for saying that or gushing all over it. I just loved it. We all loved it. Every one of us that went wants to do it again. And we want to share that enjoyment and that experience with as many people as possible. So, as I've mentioned throughout the show, a lot of the great info we've had to talk about came from the great insights of Dr. Areum Jeong. She brings with her all the bona fides to talk Korean film and Crossroads of Youth especially. Jeong is currently a visiting professor at Ua Women's University and a researcher in residence at the National Library of Korea. Previously, she has taught courses on Korean film, theater and performance, and K-pop at UCLA, USC, UC Santa Barbara, Seoul Women's University, and Szechuan University Pittsburgh Institute. Having read some of her great writing in regard to Crossroads of Youth, I had to pick her mind for a deeper look at this historic film and its context, and she was gracious enough to answer all of my questions. You've already heard some of the super cool stuff she had to tell me about this film, but there was a few little more tidbits I wanted to share from our conversations. Like me, she also saw the diversity of crowds as something unexpected. I viewed the performance multiple times, she told me, when it first premiered in Korea, and one of the things I noticed was the diversity of the audience in terms of age. In general, young Korean women take up the majority of the audience in cultural events, and I rarely see Korean elders going to shows. But whenever I went to see Crossroads, I saw many Korean elders, and I think that cheesy, corny humor works well for audiences of all ages. Now, it's wild to think that Crossroads of Youth has been back in the public eye for 15 years now. With that being said, I was really curious as to what Dr. Jeong saw as the legacy of the film and its place within Korean cinematic history. I think it's significant to discover the oldest Korean film and recreate it into a performance tradition that was kind of lost, she told me. While Japan's Benshi tradition carried on even after the invention of talkie films, Korea's Byeonsa tradition kind of faded away after the talkie films, Korean War, modernization, and so on. So it's meaningful that director Kim recreated a reenactment of the lost tradition. That said, Byeonsa performances are still not that mainstream or popular in Korea. So, as this episode closes out, we want to thank you for sharing this night out on the town with us. It's always super awesome to take in such a fantastic film viewing live. This is a special event that elevated the normal silent film and really pushed it to the next level. Also, while we're on the topic of giving thanks, the Golden Silent Films podcast has a couple thank yous to dish out. First, we can't recommend A Conversation with Kim Tae-young with J.O. of the Korea Society enough. This was a 30-minute interview that is full of great info about this whole event. It has clips from the film, photos from the performances, and like I was saying earlier, some photos of really showing how bad of shape those reels of film were in. It is a great resource and watch and can be found by searching Kim Tae-young, Crossroads of Youth, the Korea Society. You can find it on YouTube pretty easily. But just to be sure all of you out there can see it, we will also put links to it in our various social medias. And the Golden Silent Films podcast would also like to send an immense, huge amount of gratitude to Dr. Areum Jeong. She was so gracious and helpful in guiding us to a better understanding of Crossroads of Youth. I mean, she went above and beyond anything we could have expected. In fact, thanks to her, we have an insane amount of Korean film recommendations and pre- and post-war Korean film history readings to catch up on. She has really opened up a new world of film for us here, and we are incredibly excited to dive into it all. So thank you so much, Areum, for everything you have done. We greatly appreciate it and know everyone listening to this episode feels the same. Thank you again so much, and we hope to be talking with you about silent movies again soon. So, that leaves us with our closing and wrapping this show up. Did you enjoy our live event reporting? What are some of your favorite lost film stories? What international flicks should we dive into next? Do you have great experiences of seeing silent films live? Let us know all of that and more at the various social media hangouts of the Golden Silent Films podcast. On that note, if you have forgotten, we are on Instagram and Twitter. Let us know what you think about this episode. What movies, past or present, do you want us to dive into next? Our world of silence is constantly expanding internationally now. We need your input to plan out our future viewings as Season 2 finale approaches. You can do all of that at Golden Silence Cast on Instagram and at Golden Silence 1 on Twitter. And again, if you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcast outlet that allows it, subscribe, rate, review. It helps us like crazy here, and we love hearing your thoughts. We super appreciate all of your amazing support, and seeing how much you folks out there are listening only makes us want to make bigger and better episodes for all of you. With all that being said, thank you to all of you fine listeners for all of your fine listening, and as always, don't forget, the silents are golden, and talkies, they're just a fad. Before we leave, let's turn back to Byeonsa Cho Hee Bong one last time for his thoughts on the future of Crossroads of Youth. He said in an interview with the Korea Herald, "I've once said something like, I'm not ready to send this movie to a museum yet. I think I want to continue this Byeonsa performance as much as I can, because I see too many similarities between this movie and what's happening now."